Hello, today we are going to spend our day with parallel lines. On the board or in class, I discussed already what parallel lines look like. Here is another example in the word parallel. Parallel lines have the same slope, which means they're never going to touch. They're never going to cross. So like train tracks, the two tracks that the train rolls down are never going to cross each other, otherwise the train is going to collide, or it's not going to be able to move down the tracks. It's that simple. So we are looking at parallel lines. In terms of a graph, like I said, they have the same slope. So they could be angled, but they're never going to touch because the slope is the same. So if we look at our equations in the form y equals mx plus b, our m, or our slope, is always going to be the same. So this equation might be for this line, and this equation might be for that line. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. These were both positive, these are both negatives. If it's the same, your lines are parallel. So let's look at our first question. We need to graph both of these two lines on the graph given. It says parallel lines have the same slope. That means if they have the same slope, then they must be parallel. Okay, it goes both ways. So in order to graph these, we have to solve for y, or get our equations in the form y equals mx plus b. This first one is already solved for y. So by b, where I begin my graph, is going to be 4. So I'm going to put 4 there. And then my m is how I move. Since slope is always written as a fraction, rise over run, I need to make 5 a fraction. So to do that, 5 divided by 1 is still 5. It's 5 over 1. So that's our first equation. I'm going to do this one, graph it in blue eventually. And our second equation is not solved for y, so we need to solve for y. So we need y by itself. I'm going to move this negative 15x over to the other side and add 15x. So 15 minus 15 eliminates, makes 0. So we have 3y equal to, and then over here they can't combine because one has an x and one doesn't. So we have 15x and then minus 6. So again, our goal is to get y by itself, so the opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. So we have y equals, well, 15 divided by 3 will give me 5, so 5x. And then minus, it says 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So this is now in the form y equals mx plus b. So my m, my slope is 5, or as a fraction, 5 over 1. And then b is a negative 2. So this equation, I'm going to rewrite this just in green, so I have two different colors here to graph. Oops. 5 over 1, and b is negative 2. Hopefully you notice that our m's are the same. These have the same slope, which means our lines are going to be parallel. So here's my y-axis and my x-axis. I'm going to graph this first one. It's going to begin at 4. So up 1, 2, 3, 4. And my slope is rise over run. Up 5, 1, 2, 3. I can't go up 5 and to the right, so I must go down 5 and 1 to the left. Down 5 and 1 to the left. And draw our line through. That's the first one. We also need the second equation. This one begins at negative 2 on my y-axis, down 2. And our slope is the same. Rise 5 and 1 to the right. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I can't go 5, so I got to go the other direction. Down here, I'm going to go down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1 to the left. So there's my second equation as well. Please put arrows on them to show that they could go further if our graph was bigger. So you can see now that both of these are parallel to each other. And then finally it says write another equation that would be parallel to the lines above. Well, if they're going to be parallel in the form y equals mx plus b, they have to have the same slope. So these ones were both 5 over 1 or 5. So you'd need to write an equation that says y equals 5x or 5 over 1. And then it doesn't matter what b is. If we have a line that has the same slope, it doesn't matter if we're up 10 or down 20 or whatever the number might be. As long as they have the same slope, they'll be parallel. So I'm just going to pick a number. I'm going to pick 100. If you want to pick -7 or positive 15, that's fine. It doesn't matter what b is. As long as our slopes are the same, they'll be parallel. Let's do one more like this. We need to get y by itself in order to graph it. So here's y. I'm going to move the 5 over 2 to the other side, so the opposite of a positive would be subtracting 5 over 2x. Subtracting 5 over 2x. So 5 over 2 positive and negative eliminate. So we're left with y equals, and you can't combine these together because one has the x, so -5 over 2x and then minus 2. So our slope m in the form y equals mx plus b, m is a -5 over 2 right here, -5 over 2, and b is a -2. So let's solve the second one. This one, I know there's not a ton of space here, but do your best. We're going to have to draw a box to distribute because we have parentheses here. So we have -5 over 2 and then x minus 2. If you want to distribute in the side over here somewhere, go ahead and do that. So -5 over 2 times x, just put them together, -5 over 2x. And then we have -5 over 2 times -2. Well, I know a negative times a negative makes a positive. And then I need to multiply. You can use your calculator if you'd like to multiply it like this, -5 divided by 2 times -2, or just multiply it out. -2 is -2 over 1. So -5 times -2 makes a positive 10. 2 times 1 is 2. So 10 divided by 2 is just 5. So that would be a 5 right there. So I'm going to rewrite what I have. I have y plus 1 equal to -5 over 2x plus 5. And we almost have y by itself. We need to get rid of this plus 1. I'm going to then subtract 1. Like I said, I know there's not a lot of space here, but do your best. So we have y equals -5 over 2x, and 5 minus 1 is 4. So my slope is -5 over 2 in front of my x, and then b, whatever is added or subtracted to the end, is plus 4. So hopefully you notice that our slopes are the same. They better have the same slope. So let's begin this first one. On our y-axis, we're beginning at -2. And my slope is rise over run. -5 isn't going up, it's going down. And then positive 2 is to the right. So down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 to the right. Or the opposite of down and right would be up 5 and 2 to the left. That's as far as I can go, so I'm just going to draw my lines through. Extend your line further, even though you know that this is the last point. There could be one more over here. And then our second equation begins at 4. So I'm going to start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the same slope. Down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 to the right. Down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 to the right. I went down and right because it's -5 and then positive 2 is to the right. So there our lines are parallel. So again, last question, write one more equation that would be parallel to these two lines. Well, parallel lines have the same slope, so in the equation y equals mx plus b, we would have y equals m, which is negative 5 over 2, just like these ones up here, and then x plus or minus b, whatever number you want. If you want to put plus 0, it would be parallel if we went right through here. That would be another parallel line. You could put plus 10, minus 10, plus 7.5. I don't care what that number is, as long as it is parallel. Flip over to the back side. We've got a couple more questions. Now we have to think a little bit more deeply. I'm not just giving you an equation to graph. You have to use the skills you now know to write a new equation. So it says, write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form. I'm missing a word here. In slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, that passes through the given point, meaning here's the point I'm giving you, and is parallel to the line I also give you. So what that means is, here's line 1. This one happens to already be solved for y, so it's in the form y equals mx plus b. So first I'm just going to identify m and b. Well, m in front of x is just a negative 1, or as a fraction, negative 1 over 1. And then b is 4. Since we're not graphing yet, I'm going to leave this negative 1 as a whole number. Now, we want a second line that is parallel to the line that they give us. So I gave you this first line, line 1, but now I want you to find another line that's parallel to this one, but it has to go through this point. So if our lines are parallel, they must have the same slope, so this must also have a slope of negative 1. We need to find b. We don't know what that is. But if you think about it, we have a point, x1 and y1, and we have a slope. If we have a point and a slope, well, it would make sense that we could start with point-slope form. This is the form that we've been using in Chapter 5. So all I'm going to do is plug in what I know into this equation. It says y minus y1, which right here I just labeled my point with x and y. y1 is a negative 3. Those two negatives make a positive. Equals m, and m is right here, we just said negative 1 because they're parallel. And then in parentheses, the letter x minus x1, which is 5. So we need to solve this for y so we can graph it or get it into the form y equals mx plus b, and that way we know what b is as well. So I'm going to distribute, get rid of my parentheses. So I have negative 1 and x minus 5. So negative 1 times x is negative 1x. A negative times a negative I know is going to make a positive. 1 times 5 is just 5. So we have y plus 3 equal to negative 1x plus 5. We don't have y by itself yet, so I need to get rid of this positive 3 by the opposite, subtracting 3. So we are left with, those are gone, y equals negative 1x, and 5 minus 3 is a positive 2. That's in the form y equals mx plus b. So now this b right here is really the number 2. So we need to graph both line 1 and line 2 to show that they are really parallel. So I'm going to graph line 1 here in red. B is 4, so we're going to begin on our graph at up 4. So up 1, 2, 3, 4. And my slope is negative 1, or as a fraction, negative 1 over 1, meaning down 1 and 1 to the right. Down 1, 1 to the right. Or up 1, 1 to the left. So there's our first equation, first line. And then our second equation, it's right here. or you can look at what you filled in up here. For m and b, it should match. -1 for our slope, yep, and 2 is b. So we're going to begin at 2, and same slope, -1 over 1, down and right, down and right. Or the opposite would be up and left, up and left. So those lines, as you can see, they're never going to touch. They are parallel. Again, there's that word, just writing it. You don't need to write that they're parallel because I'm telling you they're parallel. I'm just reiterating or restating that they have to be parallel. They can't touch. So this next one, we're going to do the same thing. We just don't have to graph it. And now you might be saying, Ms. Calc, I don't have enough room to solve this one in order to solve for y. But this is actually in the form y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So just by looking at this, I can actually tell my slope right here is 6. So in order to write an equation of the line that's parallel to it, I know this other equation also has to have a slope of 6. Because I'm telling you they're parallel, it just has to go through this point x1 and y1. So because we're graphing, or because we're not graphing, we don't need to find b. We just need to find a new equation using these two pieces of information. So now that I know the slope is 6 from this first one, I have a point and a slope to write a new equation for line 2. So I'm going to start, I have a point and a slope, I'm going to start with point-slope form. So let's plug in what we know. We know the letter y minus y1 right here, which is -8. Those two negatives make a positive. And then m is over here, 6. And then in parentheses, x minus x1, which is 9. And all we have to do is simply solve for y to get y by itself. So we have an equation in slope-intercept form, just like they asked. So I'm going to draw my box to multiply. We have 6, and then x minus 9. So 6 times x is 6x. 6 times 9, I know it's going to be a negative because one's positive and one's negative. 6 times 9 should give us 54. So if I rewrite what I have y plus 8 equals 6x minus 54. So our goal was to get y by itself, or to have this slope-intercept form. So the opposite of adding 8 to get rid of this 8 would be subtracting 8. So I have y equals 6x, and then negative 54 minus 8. They're all negatives. Same sign, add and keep. So 8 plus 4 should give me 12. 5 plus 1 is 6. So negative 62. This is why I didn't have you graph this one, because b is negative 62, and that's not going to fit on a graph. We have two more questions just like this. One we have to graph, and one that we don't. So again, we want to get a new equation in the form y equals mx plus b from the first equation that they give us. So this first one, we need to find m and b so we can graph it. In order to do so, we need it in the form y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to draw my line down. I need to get rid of this -2. The opposite of multiplying by -2 is dividing by -2. So those eliminate, and we get y equals, well, 4 divided by -2 is -2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. And then here, two negatives again make a positive. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that is in the form y equals mx plus b. So m in front of the x there is -2, and b is 3. Now let's use what we know about parallel lines to write a new equation. We know parallel lines have the same slope. This is a poster in the back of the classroom as well. The parallel lines have the same slope. So if this slope is -2, this slope also has to be -2, because I'm telling you they are parallel. So I have a point, x1 and y1, and a slope. Let's use that point and slope. Let's think of a form, point, slope, point, slope. Well, let's use point, slope form. Y minus y1 equals our slope, x minus x1. This is on the board or on the wall as well. And let's plug in what we know. Move this up a little bit. So it says y minus y1, which is 5, equal to m, which our slope right here was -2. And then in parentheses, x minus x1, which is also a -2. Those two negatives make a positive. So let's get rid of our parentheses here by distributing. We have a -2 and then x plus 2 now. So let's distribute. -2 times x is -2x. And a -2 times a +2 is a -4. So we have y minus 5 equals -2x minus 4. And then to get y by itself so we can graph it, we need to do the opposite of subtracting 5, which is adding 5. So those eliminate, and we have y equals -2x, and then -4 plus 5, there's more positives, or you can think same sign, add and keep, different signs here. We're going to subtract. 5 minus 4 is 1, and there's more positives, so it's a plus 1. So b is 1 plus 1. So let's graph both equations. I'm going to begin with this one in green. B is 3. So I'm going to begin on my y-axis at 1, 2, 3. And my slope as a fraction is -2 over 1, which means down 2 and 1 to the right. Down 2, 1 to the right. Down 2, 1 to the right. Or up 2, 1 to the left. Same thing with our second line. This one we're beginning at 1 and same slope. So begin at 1 and our slope is still down 2, 1 to the right. Down 2, 1 to the right. We're up 2, 1 to the left. I know this is getting to be a long unit, but hopefully you get the idea, and the majority of this is a review because you should know how to plug into point-slope form and solve for y. And graph, all three of those things. Last one, let's do this quick. This one is in point-slope form already. Notice, if you see the parentheses there, see if the rest of it matches up. You have y minus a number equals a number, and then x plus or minus a number here. So our slope, m, is right there, 2/3. So if we want lines that are parallel, the slope also has to be 2/3. These are going to be the same. So just like the last one, here's our point, x1, y1, always in alphabetical order. So if we have a point and a slope, well, you guys, let's use point-slope form. It makes sense, right? Use what you have. So we have y minus y1, which is 2, equal to our slope, which is 2/3, and then x minus 18. So let's solve this. We have 2/3 and x minus 18. Hopefully you know 2/3 times x is just 2/3 x. But then we have 2/3 times -18. I'm going to multiply it out. If you want to plug it in your calculator, you would plug in it like this, 2/3 times a negative 18. 2 times 18. That might be a tricky one for some of you. It should be, if you want to do 2 times 10 would be 20, and 2 times 8 is 16, and add 20 and 16, you get negative 36. And then 3 times 1 is 3. Some of you might be able to think about what you can divide this by. You can divide both by 3. Some of you might just know in your head how many times 3 goes into 36. Well, 36 divided by 3, 3 goes into 30 10 times, 3 goes into 6 2 times, should be 12. And then on the bottom, 3 divided by 3 is 1. So that's really just negative 12. 12 divided by 1 is just 12. So we have y minus 2 equals 2/3 x minus 12. But then we want y by itself because it asked us for slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So the opposite or the inverse of subtracting 2 would be adding 2. Those eliminate. So we have y equals 2/3 x. Ooh, different signs means we subtract. 12 minus 2 is 10, and there are more negatives. If you have other questions, please make sure to ask. Otherwise, you do have a short activity, should be pretty quick, and then your homework. Good luck.